Episode 2 of Arctic Ocean via the Dempster Highway and all other remote places. This is where the adventure really begins. Telegraph Creek and staging for the Canol Highway. Now that we've got all the details out of the way, we can get to the real meat of this. Telegraph Creek, there's a couple of things you need to know. Grades up to 20%, steep mountain road. It's also got this interesting sign here that I can't say that I've seen anywhere else. Maybe somebody can tell me what it means. Debris flow hazard. I don't even know what that means. I'm pretty sure that has to do with rocks flowing, but you'll figure out that there's a lot of dangers on this highway pretty quickly. Keep in mind that we aren't doing this as a race trip. We are simply cruising and exploring beautiful British Columbia, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Alaska, and parts of Alberta. So enjoy the scenery, and we'll go through some history and kind of some of the trip that we've done so far. So where is Telegraph Creek and why should I care? That's two important questions that we need to answer here. The where, that's relatively easy. This is northwestern BC. And by northwestern, I mean north-northwestern and western, north-northwestern BC. It's up against the ocean, 120 kilometers west off of the Stewart-Cassiar Highway with an entry point near Dease Lake. Now, before some geography nerd pokes their head in here and says, hey, it's not really against the ocean, first off, you're never going to out-nerd me on geography. It's just not going to happen. Secondly, open up Google Maps or Apple Maps or whatever geography you prefer to use, draw a line straight south out of Telegraph Creek and tell me how many hundreds of kilometers it is west of Vancouver, and then tell me that it's not close to the ocean. It's close to the ocean, you just can't see it from here. Now, beyond the history that we're going to talk about a little bit later, what makes this area unique? Well, the highway that comes into this area kind of follows between the Stikine and the Tuya River. The Tuya River is the one on the left here, and then we are meeting up in the next couple of seconds here up against that mountain ledge or the cliff edge with the Stikine River. Now, what's really neat about this, other than the fact that this is where I discovered that you can make macaroni and cheese in a jet boil, and it tastes pretty good even without butter, is that underneath this rock face where you're going to see what looks like kind of a gigantic eagle with its wings spread out. You'll also see in the water that they're two different colors. Now, on the far side of the river is the Stikine River, and the Tuya River is on the closer side. But this is where the water meets, and it forms into quite a large river. This whole area, you're crossing back and forth across the river and coming to these ridges where the road is made up alongside either the cliffside or where the cliff meets between the rivers, and it's regionally known as the Grand Canyon. Obviously not the Grand Canyon, but it's not hard to see why it is. There are some really tall cliff sides. It is just under 1,000 feet down to the river at the higher points. Obviously you do cross back and forth, but that's what makes the 20% grade. This road's super cool. It's also got gates on both sides because if it gets wet, you get super dead. So maybe pay attention to those gates when you're there. What's also neat about this is all of the different rock formations. This area is volcanic. The Tahltan people, which are the First Nations that inhabit this area, or one of the First Nations that are well known for their work with obsidian that can be found locally here. So if anybody has anything that they can teach me about this, I would be super keen on knowing. There's just so much neat formation. You see down there on the right hand of the screen, that's my son James, the second member of this journey, checking out that kind of rock formation at the bottom. It's just very unique. Now here we are in the town. According to Wiki, there are 56 people that live in Telegraph Creek at this point. Used to be a major hub. It kind of came to be as a town. I mean, obviously the First Nations were there significantly before the Telegraph was, but it came to be in the 1850s and 60s during the Stikine and the Cassiar Gold Rush. Telegraph Creek obviously isn't gold, but it was also meant to be the staging area or one of the connector points for the Russo or Russian-American telegraph line, which we'll circle back to in a minute or two, because I need to give everybody about a 10-second warning that there is going to be an exceptional kind of moment. So, prepare yourselves and just take yourself out of the history lesson. We saw a baby wolf, or I did anyway. James got a little bit too far ahead and didn't quite see it, though he might have seen it. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him. Anyhow, 10-second warning's over. There's a baby wolf. So we stopped, took a picture. I'm pretty sure it's a wolf. I don't think it's a coyote. It's definitely not a fox, as far as I can tell. Black, But I stopped and I wanted to take a better look and better picture because I just had to work off the video. But then I remembered that baby wolves are often accompanied by larger wolves, and they probably don't have a sense of humor about that, and I don't want to get ate. So here we are. So with that, we can circle back to our history lesson and things that really should have been obvious at that time, much like the mama wolf, baby wolf scenario. They tried to run a telegraph line from California all the way to Moscow. Now, those of you that know geography will know that there's an ocean between those, and not only an ocean, you got the Bering Sea, or the Beaufort, depending on where you start. But anybody that spent time up there like me knows, rowdy place. You do not cross that. So they encountered some problems that really, they said were unforeseen, but they either didn't have smart people or they weren't really unforeseen and it just didn't turn out. There's another thing on the right there where you notice that the road washed away. That's part of the wet has the gates down scenarios that I was talking about earlier. Now I'll joke a little bit about the conditions on the road, but in all fairness, we're on light dual sports. We're both experienced riders and we're set up quite well for this type of travel, so it is relatively safe. But obviously, no guardrails. Now this section you would have seen going the other way, but I think it's significant and something I kind of wanted to point out. Now it's not the 1,000-foot section going down, but I don't know, it looks like 400 or 500 feet down, and it's the Tuy River on the left and the Stikine River on the right, and it's one of my favorite areas to ride in. I don't know if it's a top 10, but it's definitely top 20 and fairly experienced rider, so it's like I've seen a lot of cool stuff, and this always amazes me every time I go here. It's just a beautiful thing. I don't know whether they filled in the gaps along the top or whether it was just a plateau that just happens to go straight down. It seems really odd that it'd be that narrow because it really is straight down on both sides. But just absolutely beautiful place. Now, unfortunately, I didn't want to make a 20 or 30 minute long video on this. I really could have with the amount of footage that we had and just the relative beauty in the area. But before moving on to the second part of this video with the connection going up towards Ross River where we're staging for the Canol Highway, I really wanted to send a thank you to the Talton people that both maintain and open up this land. It is Indigenous territory. I think there's 3 bands in the area. But they were very, very friendly, very helpful people. And I did want to highlight, you will see in the video there that there was a pretty significant forest fire damage in there. It's a good reminder of how difficult it can be to live in remote conditions. We did have some good stories with a lady that lived in Jade City there, which I'd love to share, but I don't think it's the appropriate format for it. But it involved a helicopter ride, super low, and not being able to hold your lunch, or other fluids. Now, I'd only known the lady for about 5 minutes when she told me the story about being evacuated, so I'm pretty sure that she's fine with sharing it. But if you ever get to Jade City, ask her about it. It's an entertaining story. And she's a pretty good storyteller. Jade City's kind of a neat place. We camped off to the left there in the trees. The family that runs the Cassiar Mountain Jade store, they are very friendly. They have a free campground there off to the left. And then they have coffee that they can serve you on the inside. It's kind of neat seeing the jade everywhere because it's just laying there, gigantic rock, jade. I always assumed that you had to dig deeper for it. Lots of cool old mining equipment, and what's neat about this is that it hasn't been picked over for parts. There was some really, I wouldn't say authentic because it's original. It's just neat to see old equipment that just kind of just came to a rest there. It's done, but they curate it quite nicely, and it just sits there. But so from leaving Jade Creek, or Jade City, we headed north. We finished the Stuart Cassiar Highway. Absolutely stunning. It's take the Stuart Cassiar. It's a beautiful alternative to the Alaskan Highway. Offers you lots of neat places, lots of neat history. This is just an old mining station that was just outside Jade City. You had to go kind of up on a side road. We were told on our maps that it would be a ghost city, but it looks like they are trying to reclaim it and moving a lot of that equipment around. The lakes up in this area, there's lots of high mineralization lakes. It doesn't show up well on a normal camera, although you can see it a little bit, just absolutely stunningly blue and teal lakes. You can see different shades of it as the depth changes, but there's James and our 2 little bikes. Sitting next to the lake, but we got a chance to sit by a few. Unfortunately, early in the trip, we did have to cover a lot of miles, so we didn't get to stop as much as we should. But here's another area that's been hit by a forest fire. If you go back and you watch my video from 12, 13 years ago there, this was entirely forested, and that is something that's going to come up a lot in our videos. It is not hard to see why we have been smoked out the last couple of years. This area has been devastated, and it's not just the Stuart Cassiar. Here's James behaving entirely reasonably. He discovered during the trip that you can relax with your legs on the safari tank. It actually turned out to be quite comfortable for him. So he enjoyed stretching out a little bit. And here we are crossing north of Watson Lake. We are headed down the Campbell Highway, which, for those of you taking field notes, it is the first 100 kilometers out of Watson Lake north. It connects from Watson Lake to Carmacks, but the first 100 kilometers is paved, and after that there is a ton of gravel. Well, although admittedly extraordinarily well-conditioned gravel, so it's quite an easy ride. But it brings us to kind of an interesting problem we encountered on it. I don't know the exact mileage, but we were somewhere around 300 and some kilometers in towards Ross River, and there is nothing between Watson Lake and Ross River where we staged for the Canol Highway. But our bikes, we can go roughly 500 kilometers between fills, about 350 off the tanks, and then we have bladders that get us another 150. But there was no signs or anything on this road warning us that that this highway was closed or that there was a forest fire. Now, I am familiar enough with the forest fire situations to know that there are apps that you can look, but the last time I had checked, it wasn't showing up. It wasn't active anymore, but the road was closed when we got there, and we were significantly past the point where we could make it back to Watson Lake. So we could have sat there and waited and hoped that somebody eventually went 300 kilometers down a road that doesn't have a single object on it. Or, as you can see here, we can try to push through. Now, thankfully, there was no large smoke billowing off of it, so I was fairly confident that it was in the late stages. But it is super not something that I recommend. This was a moment of, I wouldn't call it desperation, but we just didn't really have an alternative. We had to go through because we could not make it back to Watson Lake with the fuel that we had, and there was a very low level of confidence that somebody would be coming in the next couple of days there. The road that we had traveled on, there was nobody on it. We were one of the only travelers. But it does take us to Ross River, where we staged for the Canol Highway, which honestly super fun. So we're going to have a really great time on the next video. Making for that. There's me pointing out the campground that I totally drove by. But until next time, and the Canol Highway, which honestly, it's super excited to share this with you. So thanks for being along, and we'll see you in the next video.